Imagine standing at the absolute base of like a massive trembling mountain. The air around you is thick. It feels completely electric. There is smoke pouring down the slopes. Thunder is just shaking the ground beneath your feet. And you are standing in this massive crowd about to make the ultimate binding promise to the creator of the universe.
Right. I mean, the stakes literally could not be higher in that moment.
Exactly. But here's the really strange thought we are exploring today. What if the very words coming out of your mouth, the words you are actively using to, swear your eternal obedience, are actually a secret phonetic trap?
And a trap that they built themselves.
Yeah. What if, purely through the mechanics of human vocal cords and sound waves, you are outwardly saying one thing, but your voice is mathematically broadcasting the exact opposite?
It sounds like science fiction, honestly. But we are looking at what might be the ultimate audio illusion today, like a linguistic sleight of hand happening at the very dawn of written scripture.
Which is just such a wild concept, and that is our singular focus today. We are taking a massive, highly specific deep dive into a fascinating comparative analysis of scriptural texts. Specifically, we're looking at the Torah, the broader Bible, and the Quran.
And, we should really set the stage properly for you, the listener. The entire stack of sources we are pulling from today comes from the groundbreaking research and synthesis of Dr. Khaled Waleed.
Right.
He is looking at these ancient texts through an incredibly unique, multidisciplinary lens. We're talking about mapping human speech sounds, diving into biology, tracing geography, and ultimately theology.
Dr. Waleed is essentially treating these ancient texts as an active, microscopic crime scene. It is a completely forensic approach to ancient literature.
An audio crime scene. That is the perfect way to frame it.
It really is. So our mission today is to unpack Dr. Waleed's theory that these massive, historically irreconcilable contradictions between the Bible and the Quran might actually be deeply connected through what he calls linguistic masks.
But, before we take that plunge, we really need to establish our own ground rules for this conversation.
Absolutely. We are dealing with major foundational religious texts today, which means we're dealing with deeply held beliefs.
Right, which is why we need to state clearly that our role here is entirely neutral.
100% neutral.
We are not theologians trying to settle a thousands-year-old debate. We are not endorsing any specific religious perspective, and we are not confirming or denying any theological claims as absolute truth.
We are just two people who love exploring complex ideas, acting as your impartial guides through the meticulous, mind-bending theories presented by Dr. Khaled Waleed in his research.
We are mapping out his argument, examining his mechanics, and just seeing where his framework takes us.
And where this specific line of inquiry started for Dr. Waleed is actually kind of funny. I mean, it didn't start in some ancient, dusty archive in the Middle East. It started with a social media meme.
Which honestly says a lot about how we consume information today, right?
Right.
Ancient textual debates being visually distilled into two juxtaposed images for a quick scroll on your phone.
Totally. So Dr. Waleed's sources point to this specific meme that compares two distinct accounts of the exact same historical event. The event is the Israelites gathered at Mount Sinai right after receiving the commandments.
Right.
The meme stacks the two texts side by side. On the bottom, you have the biblical account, specifically from Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 27. Moses tells the people what is expected of them, and the people respond. The meme highlights their response in big, bold letters. They say, "We will listen and obey."
A definitive statement of compliance. I mean, there is no ambiguity there at all.
None. But then on the top half of the meme, you have the Quranic account of this exact same moment, found in the second chapter, Surah al-Baqarah, verse 93. And the Quran portrays the Israelites responding to this massive mountainous covenant by saying, "We hear and disobey."
We hear and disobey. When you see them stacked against each other like that, it is incredibly jarring.
It feels like a zero-sum game. You look at that on the surface and you think, okay, well, someone made a massive typo. One text literally says obey. The other text explicitly says disobey. They are just directly contradicting each other.
Right, but Dr. Waleed argues that reacting that way is looking at the texts far too two-dimensionally.
How so?
He proposes that we need to view this through a forensic lens, specifically adopting what he calls God's all-knowing perspective.
Okay, an all-knowing perspective.
Yeah. If you are operating under the assumption of an omniscient creator, that creator is not functioning as a court stenographer, just writing down whatever public relations statement the crowd happens to be shouting.
Wait, a public relations statement? Are you saying we will listen and obey was just PR?
Well, think about what happens next. Dr. Waleed points out that we have to look at the immediate forensic evidence of the outcome. What happened right after they stood at that mountain and made this grand promise?
They built the golden calf.
Exactly. Both texts, the Torah and the Quran, are in absolute 100% agreement on this historical outcome. Almost immediately after swearing the covenant, the Israelites fell into gross idolatry.
They literally built an idol and worshipped it.
So Dr. Waleed argues that the Quran is not misquoting their words. Instead, it is acting as a forensic record of their true inner state. The Quran explicitly notes that their hearts were already filled with the worship of the calf at the very moment they were speaking.
Okay, let me see if I am grasping Dr. Waleed's framework here. You are saying God is essentially quoting their inner monologue rather than their outward spoken words.
Yes.
It is like a divine hot mic picking up what they were actually thinking.
A divine hot mic is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. Dr. Waleed suggests that the Torah records the surface-level historical event. It records what the human scribes, the observers, heard with their physical ears.
Right, the people stood there and outwardly promised compliance.
But the Quran, which claims to be the direct, unaltered word of the witness who sees the hearts, bypasses the PR statement entirely. It records the biological and psychological reality of that moment.
Oh, wow.
They were saying one thing with their mouths, but their internal state was screaming, "We hear, but we are going to disobey."
I mean, I get that on a psychological level. It's like when a friend asks if you want to help them move furniture on a Saturday morning, and you say, "Oh, I would love to."
But your internal monologue is saying, "I am absolutely going to fake a stomachache."
Exactly. The intention completely contradicts the articulation.
Right.
But, this brings up a massive linguistic problem. If the Quran is translating the reality of their hearts to disobedience, what exactly were they saying with their mouths in real life?
That is the big question.
Were they just flat out lying in Hebrew? Did they wink at each other while they said it?
This is where Dr. Waleed's work transitions from theology into highly technical linguistics. He isn't satisfied with the simple explanation that they just lied. He believes there is a microscopic acoustic mechanism at play here.
Okay.
He performs a deep phonetic unmasking of the Hebrew text used in Deuteronomy 5.27.
The phrase where they say, "we will hear and obey," or, as I think some literal translations in the sources put it, "we will hear and do it."
Yeah, the Hebrew phrase in the text is v'shamanu v'asinu. And Dr. Waleed focuses intensely on the root of that "we will do" or "we will act" concept. He isolates this specific Hebrew word, na'aseh.
Na'aseh.
Now, to understand Dr. Waleed's unmasking, we have to look at how this word is actually constructed and pronounced in the human vocal tract.
Okay.
Linguists use systems to map exact human speech sounds, and Dr. Waleed breaks down the phonetic data of this word syllable by syllable.
Break it down for me. What does na'aseh actually sound like when spoken in ancient Hebrew?
Let's take it piece by piece. You start with the N sound, which is standard. Then you have a sound like the A in father, so nah.
Nah.
Got it. Then comes the crucial phonetic hinge. The middle consonant is an ayin.
An ayin.
Right. This is a pharyngeal consonant, meaning it is articulated deep in the throat. It is a thick, guttural sound that exists in both ancient Hebrew and Arabic.
It's one of those sounds we don't really have a direct equivalent for in modern English, right? It feels deeper, almost like it originates in the chest rather than the mouth.
Exactly. It requires a literal constriction of the pharynx. So you have na, then this deep throat sound, ah, and then a sin, which is a standard S sound.
Huh?
Finally, you end with an E sound, like a soft A or I. Put it all together, and the Hebrew word for "we will do" sounds like na'aseh.
Na'aseh. Okay, so that is the outward promise. Now, what happens when Dr. Waleed compares this to the Arabic word used in the Quran for "we disobey"?
The Arabic root word used for their disobedience is nasa. If we break down the phonetic pronunciation of the Arabic nasa, it sounds like naza.
Nasa.
But that middle section still contains that deep, guttural ayin sound.
Wait, say those back to back for me. The Hebrew for "we will do" and the Arabic for "we disobey.
The Hebrew is naseh. The Arabic is nasa.
That overlap is insane. They sound almost identical.
Dr. Waleed's phonetic analysis shows an over 80% direct phonetic match between the two words. The starting N, the A vowel, and that deep, guttural ayin in the middle are a 100% identical acoustic match across both languages.
It is a mondegreen.
A mondegreen.
Yeah, you know that phenomenon where your brain mishears a song lyric because the sounds overlap so perfectly? Like the classic Jimi Hendrix lyric, "Excuse me while I kiss the sky," but millions of people swear he is singing, "Excuse me while I kiss the sky."
Right, right.
Your brain fills in a different meaning because the phonetic data hitting your eardrum is virtually identical.
A mondegreen's the exact right analogy here. Dr. Waleed's arguing that the Israelites created an intentional or perhaps a psychologically driven phonetic mondegreen. It is a literal audio illusion. They are speaking a word that, if you look it up in a Hebrew dictionary, outwardly means "we will act." But the acoustic signature that is physically ringing out into the desert air sounds exactly like the Arabic root for "we disobey."
I have to push back on this a little bit, though. I mean, Arabic and Hebrew are sister Semitic languages, sure, but they aren't the same language. How does the Hebrew nasa organically morph into the Arabic nasa in the listener's ear?
That's a great question.
Does Dr. Waleed explain the actual physical mechanics of that shift? Or is he just pointing out that they sound vaguely similar?
He goes deep into the physical mechanics. He provides 3 specific, scientifically documented phonetic shifts that occur in the vocal tract when speaking these Semitic languages.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, he looks at the transition from the Hebrew S sound to the Arabic S sound. The Arabic S in this word is a sad, which is a thicker, heavier, more emphatic S than the standard Hebrew sin.
Okay, so how does a light S become a heavy S?
Dr. Waleed points out that when an S sound immediately follows that deep guttural ain we talked about, the S naturally thickens.
Oh, because of the throat shape?
Exactly. The physical placement of your tongue and the shape of your throat required to make that deep ain naturally drag the subsequent S down into a heavier, more emphatic sound.
Your mouth is already out of position. It is physically prepped by the throat sound to make the heavier Arabic sound instead of the lighter Hebrew one.
The vocal tract essentially dictates the shift. The second mechanism involves the friction created by the vowels. When you transition from that deep throat sound to the S, your tongue is low in your mouth, and then has to rise sharply.
Right.
This rapid movement creates a fricative, heavier sound again, pushing the listener's ear to perceive the Arabic and.
That covers the consonants, but what about the end of the word? The Hebrew ends in that soft A sound, nase, but the Arabic ends in a long, hard A, nasa.
That is Dr. Waleed's third phonetic point. In ancient Hebrew pronunciation, that ending sound is not sharp or crisp. It is an ambiguous, softer sound. Dr. Waleed notes that to an Arabic-tuned ear, especially when this word is spoken quickly in the middle of a crowded, chaotic sentence, that soft Hebrew ending naturally slurs. It slides and is perceived acoustically as the long a sound.
So the Hebrew nasa naturally slurs into nasa, which is functionally indistinguishable from the Arabic nasa.
Dr. Waleed's conclusion from this segment of his research is that this phonetic overlap is simply too precise mathematically and biologically to be a coincidence.
It's just too perfect.
He posits that this is a deliberate audio mask. The Israelites used a word that gave them plausible deniability. On paper, it meant compliance. But acoustically, biologically, it was the literal sound of disobedience.
It is a linguistic Trojan horse. They are smuggling their rebellion into the covenant, hiding it inside a word that looks like obedience.
That's a great way to put it.
But hold on, if nasa is the future tense, meaning we will do what happens when they talk about the past.
Now we're getting into the really fascinating stuff.
Because if they are playing this highly sophisticated phonetic game with future promises, what happens when they have to describe things they have already done?
That question leads directly to what Dr. Waleed considers the definitive crime scene evidence in the text. This brings us to a concept known as a hapax legomenon and what he terms the temporal trap.
A hapax legomenon. I love linguistics, but that sounds like an ancient curse. What does that actually mean in this context?
It is a technical term used in textual criticism. It refers to a word or a very specific grammatical form of a word that appears only a single time within an entire massive body of text.
Just once.
Right. And Dr. Waleed has found a monumental one in the Hebrew text regarding this exact root word for doing or acting.
What is the word?
We established that na says the future tense. The past tense of this root, meaning we did or we have done, is the Hebrew word vasinu.
Vasinu.
Now apply the exact same phonetic analysis we just did. To an Arabic-tuned ear, the Hebrew vasinu sounds virtually identical to the Arabic word wasina.
And what does wasina mean?
It translates directly to, and we disobeyed.
They did it again. The exact same trick.
Yeah.
The Hebrew word for we did sounds identical to the Arabic word for we disobeyed.
But here is where Dr. Waleed introduces a stunning statistical anomaly from his concordance data. He looks at how often these specific words are actually used in the text. The future tense variants of we will do are used extensively. They appear over 2,000 times in the Hebrew texts. The Israelites are constantly promising what they will do tomorrow.
Sure, I mean, that makes sense for a massive religious text. It is a book heavily focused on covenants, laws, and future promises. 2,000 times makes sense.
But when Dr. Waleed searches for the past tense form vasinu, he finds that it appears only 7 times in the entire Hebrew Bible.
7 times?
And within the 5 books of the Torah specifically, it appears only a single time.
Wait, I have to stop you there. Why does that frequency matter? The root word just means to do or to make. People do things constantly. Why would a basic word for we did only show up 7 times in an entire library of ancient books?
That glaring absence is exactly Dr. Waleed's point. A basic past tense verb should be everywhere. The fact that it is missing is the evidence.
Evidence of what?
Dr. Waleed theorizes a psychological and linguistic concept he calls temporal suspension.
Temporal suspension, meaning they are somehow suspended in time.
Psychologically and linguistically, yes. Dr. Waleed argues that the authors of the text, or perhaps the collective consciousness of the people speaking the language, actively avoided using the past tense vasinu because it acts as a direct, undeniable admission of guilt.
Oh, that is fascinating.
Think about the phonetic reality we just established. If the sound of the word we did acoustically means we disobeyed, then saying vasinu is physically forcing your mouth to confess your failure in the past tense.
Because the sound itself is a confession.
Exactly. It is too final. It is an admission that the disobedience is already a cemented historical fact.
Right.
So according to Dr. Waleed, they retreat. They hide in the future tense.
They hide in nasi. We will do it.
By endlessly repeating the future tense, they trap themselves in a temporal suspension. They're constantly promising to do the right thing tomorrow, forever delaying actual obedience in the present moment. It is a massive, culturally codified evasion tactic.
That is a staggering psychological insight. It is the ultimate form of procrastination, but baked into a national language.
It really is.
I mean, if I just keep telling myself I'm going to start my diet tomorrow, I never actually have to admit the past tense reality of I ate an entire cake yesterday. The future tense is a defense mechanism.
The future tense is safe. It is full of unfulfilled potential and completely devoid of accountability. The past tense requires a reckoning. So Dr. Waleed argues they scrubbed the past tense from the record to avoid the reckoning.
But they didn't scrub it entirely. You said it appears exactly 1 time in the Torah.
In Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 6, out of tens of thousands of words, this specific form, vasinu, slips through the editorial net 1 single time in the 5 books of Moses.
Wow.
Dr. Waleed calls this single occurrence the linguistic footprint or the trace evidence.
It is the single drop of blood the criminal forgot to wipe up at the crime scene.
For Dr. Waleed, this single surviving vasinu is the ultimate proof of his theory. It is the artifact that proves the Quranic assertion.
Right, because the Quran explicitly says their reality was wasina and we disobeyed.
The Hebrew text tried to hide this reality by constantly leaning on the future tense. But that one surviving vasinu perfectly matches the Quranic charge. It is the forensic proof of their internal state leaking out into the physical text.
Okay, so we have established this incredible linguistic trap, but what does this actually mean for the people living through it? We've talked about how they trap themselves linguistically, suspended between a past they refuse to admit and a future they refuse to commit to.
Right.
But Dr. Waleed's sources don't just leave this as an interesting grammar lesson. He takes this concept of temporal suspension and applies it directly to their physical, biological reality, right?
He does, and this is where the synthesis of Dr. Waleed's work becomes incredibly expansive. He connects the linguistic evasion directly to human biology and geography.
Okay, biology and geography.
He argues that you cannot cleanly separate the language you speak from the physical reality your body experiences. The linguistic suspension caused a literal, biological, and geographic suspension.
I want to unpack the biological part first because this is wild to me. In the sources, Dr. Waleed brings up this fascinating dietary metaphor regarding the Israelites in the wilderness. He focuses heavily on the narrative of the manna and the quail.
Yes, according to the texts, God provided the Israelites with manna from heaven and quail, a miraculously provided clean and highly sustaining food source.
Right.
Dr. Waleed frames this provision not just as basic physical nourishment to keep them from starving, but as a biological foundation required for divine, elevated knowledge.
A biological foundation.
He refers to the effect of this diet as providing nervous system tranquility.
Nervous system tranquility. I am obsessed with that phrasing. It implies that what they were eating was specifically designed to chemically prepare their brains and bodies to receive high-level spiritual data.
Exactly. To hold up their end of a cosmic covenant, to process and understand the massive spiritual downloads they were receiving at the mountain, their physical biology needed to be optimized. The manna represents a chemically elevated state of being.
But, as both the biblical and Quranic texts record, the Israelites rejected it.
They rejected it completely.
Right. They complained constantly. They literally said, we are sick of this heavenly food. We want what we used to eat back in Egypt when we were slaves. And they specifically demand onions, lentils, and garlic.
Dr. Waleed views this specific dietary demand as a profound biological downgrade. He categorizes onions, lentils, and garlic as heavy, sulfurous, starchy, earthy foods.
Okay.
By demanding these specific items, they were physically tethering themselves to the mundane world.
Earthly tethering.
Yeah.
So, by choosing the heavy starches over the divine manna, they are chemically anchoring themselves to a lower state of consciousness.
Yes.
I mean, I get a food coma after eating heavy carbs, but is Dr. Waleed saying eating garlic literally blocks spiritual elevation?
He is drawing a direct parallel between the gut and the mind. The heavy sulfurous diet biologically rooted them in the lowest physical state, which perfectly mirrored their psychological refusal to rise to the spiritual occasion of the covenant.
Wow, so the food was reflecting the spiritual choice.
Just as they used language to evade the present moment of obedience, they used heavy, earthly food to evade the biological readiness required for spiritual elevation. It is a complete systemic rejection of the divine frequency.
That actually makes total sense if you think about modern gut-brain axis research. I mean, have you ever tried to read a complex philosophical book after eating a massive bowl of heavy pasta and garlic bread?
You can't do it.
You can't. Your brain just shuts down. Your body is diverting all its blood and energy to your stomach to process the heavy earthly material, and there is absolutely nothing left in the tank for higher cognition.
It is the exact same physiological principle, scaled up to a national spiritual level. And because they evaded the present moment verbally with the phonetic mask and biologically with the heavy diet, Dr. Waleed argues they triggered the ultimate geographical consequence.
The 40 years of wandering in the desert.
Right. Dr. Waleed doesn't view the wilderness simply as a punishment of getting physically lost because they lacked a map. He views it as a geographical trap.
Yeah, geographical trap.
It is the physical, topographical manifestation of their temporal suspension.
A place with no time, no progress, and no evolution. They're just spinning their wheels in the sand, geographically, exactly the way they were spinning their wheels linguistically by constantly saying, we will do it tomorrow.
The wilderness is the geographic equivalent of the word nasa. It is endless potential energy with zero kinetic realization. They are trapped in a perpetual holding pattern.
This brings us to those incredibly vivid metaphors Dr. Waleed highlights from the Quran to describe this exact state of being. The metaphors of the dog and the donkey. Let's start with the dog, because I found his interpretation of this fascinating.
Dr. Waleed draws on Surah Al-Araf, verse 176, which compares the one who actively strips himself of divine signs to a panting dog.
Okay.
The verse roughly translates to, his example is like that of the dog. If you chase him, he pants. Or if you leave him, he pants.
It is a very visceral, almost disturbing image. A dog just endlessly panting, totally disconnected from whatever the external stimuli actually is.
Dr. Waleed maps this panting directly to the chemical restlessness caused by their earthly tethering. The heavy diet, the refusal of divine tranquility, creates a perpetual state of biological anxiety.
And linguistically.
Linguistically, he likens this panting to their endless repetition of the future tense.
Oh, I see the connection. We will do it as a linguistic panting.
Yeah.
It is a rapid-fire verbal defense mechanism that never actually satisfies the requirement of obedience, just like panting never truly quenches a dog's thirst. It is just exhaustion without resolution.
It is action without progress. The second metaphor Dr. Waleed analyzes is from Surah Al-Jumu'ah, verse 5, which uses the imagery of a donkey carrying books.
Right. The verse talks about those who were entrusted with the Torah but did not uphold it, comparing them to a donkey carrying volumes of heavy books on its back.
Dr. Waleed sees this as the ultimate tragic irony of their situation. A donkey expends massive physical effort to carry heavy scrolls across the desert, but it has absolutely zero comprehension of the light, the knowledge, or the truth contained within those scrolls.
I want to really dig into this metaphor. A donkey doesn't lack the physical strength to carry the Torah. It lacks the cognitive hardware to decode it.
Precisely.
Are you saying Waleed is arguing that the Israelites, by making these linguistic and biological choices, essentially uninstalled the software required to read the very books they were carrying?
That is precisely his argument. They carried the physical text of the Torah. They preserved the letters, the grammar, the outward forms with meticulous care. But because of their linguistic evasion, their earthly tethering, and their chemical restlessness, they were totally disconnected from its inner reality. They had the hardware, the physical scrolls, but their biological and spiritual operating system could no longer run the software.
They were carrying the weight of the law without any of the illumination of its spirit.
Exactly.
It's like having a supercomputer in your backpack, but only using it as a paperweight because you refuse to plug it in. So if we look at the progression of Dr. Waleed's argument so far, it is a cascading failure.
It really is.
It starts with a phonetic mask hiding behind a word that sounds like disobedience. That linguistic evasion creates a temporal trap, avoiding the present. That leads to a biological downgrade, choosing earthly starches over divine tranquility, which finally results in a geographical track, the wilderness.
A perfect summary.
But why? What is the actual root cause of this entire chain reaction? Why go through all this avoidance in the first place?
That question is the pivot point in Dr. Waleed's entire synthesis. To explain the root cause, he introduces two massive conceptual frameworks, Baka and Maka.
Okay, Baka with a B and Maka with an M. Now, I have to ask for clarification here because most people are familiar with Mecca as a physical city in Saudi Arabia. Why is Dr. Waleed using it as a psychological operating system? That seems like a massive conceptual leap.
It is a conceptual leap, but a deliberate one. He's not talking about the modern physical geography of the Arabian Peninsula.
Right.
He is using these terms as conceptual archetypes representing two fundamentally opposed operating systems of the human heart and human society. Let's start with Baka.
Okay, Baka.
In Dr. Waleed's framework, a Baka represents pure divine knowledge, spiritual elevation, and what he translates conceptually as luck or divine grace. It is the unearned, freely given illumination from the Creator.
So Baka is the mana. It is the tranquility. It is the state of being completely open to the divine without trying to control it, negotiate with it, or monetize it.
Now, opposed to Baka is Maka. Conceptually, Dr. Waleed frames Maka as representing the material share.
The material share.
It is all about money, commerce, earthly stakes, accounting, ownership, and debt. It is a purely transactional view of the universe.
Maka is the onions and the garlic. It is the physical, the tangible, the transactional ledger. I do this for God, so God owes me this.
And Dr. Waleed points to a specific dynamic he calls the cognitive diversion, drawing heavily from Surah Al-Araf, verse 146.
What does that verse say?
This verse speaks of God turning away from his signs those who act arrogantly on the earth without right. Dr. Waleed argues that the Israelites experienced this exact cognitive diversion.
Okay.
They were offered Baka, the divine signs, the covenant, the grace at the mountain. But because of their deep-seated arrogance and their desire for control, they actively stripped themselves of it.
They chose the material accounting of Maka over the divine grace of Baka.
They wanted a transactional relationship with God. They wanted to negotiate the terms, to control the outcomes, to secure their earthly share and build a golden idol they could touch and see.
Right, something material.
And Dr. Waleed argues that the moment you make that choice, the moment you prioritize the material over the divine alam, a profound consequence occurs.
A consequence orchestrated by God, according to the verse you mentioned. I will turn away from my signs, those who act arrogantly.
The cognitive diversion is a divine block. Because they chose the operating system of Maka, they lost the capacity to perceive Baka.
So, according to Dr. Waleed, when you prioritize the material share over divine grace, your operating system fundamentally crashes. You literally lose the ability to see the truth. You become the donkey carrying the books, you have the data on your back, but you can't process the meaning anymore.
That cognitive crash, this fundamental inability to perceive the divine reality without dragging it down into a material transaction, is what Dr. Waleed believes is the root cause of why the texts of the Bible and the Quran diverge so sharply.
Which brings us to the final macroscopic view of our deep dive today. And this is where we need to spend some serious time.
Definitely.
We spent the first half of this conversation in the microscopic, the phonetic pronunciations, the single occurrences of words, the specific dietary choices of onions versus manna. But Dr. Waleed's sources take all of this microscopic evidence and apply it to the broader landscape of massive textual contradictions between the Bible and the Quran.
Dr. Waleed argues that the cognitive diversion, the crash of the Baka operating system, didn't just affect their behavior in the wilderness. It fundamentally altered the way they recorded, transmitted, and understood their own history and theology for millennia.
Wow.
The major narrative differences between the Bible and the Quran are, in his view, direct symptoms of this underlying cognitive split.
Let's really dig into the top differences Dr. Waleed compiles in his sources. And again, to remind the listener, we are simply reporting Dr. Waleed's compiled framework impartially. We are exploring how his theory categorizes these massive theological divides. Let's start with the biggest one, the nature of God and the identity of Jesus.
Okay.
How does a crashed operating system explain the difference here?
Let's establish the baseline first. The biblical text presents a triune God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and affirms the physical incarnation and divinity of Jesus.
Right.
The Quranic text explicitly rejects the Trinity, emphasizing absolute, indivisible oneness, and frames Jesus solely as a highly revered human messenger and prophet, not as a divine being.
Okay, so how does Waleed's framework explain this divergence? How does choosing the Makkah operating system lead to the Trinity?
Dr. Waleed argues that the Makkah operating system, the transactional, materially focused mindset, cannot comprehend an abstract, purely formless, absolute divine.
It can't process it.
It requires the divine to be tangible. It needs God to step into the material ledger. Therefore, the theology naturally drifts towards incarnation. God must become flesh.
Oh, I see.
God must have a familial structure, a father and a son, because those are earthly, material concepts that a Makkah mindset can understand and categorize.
So the Makkah OS forces the divine into material terms because it lacks the software to process absolute formless grace. It has to make God physical. Whereas the Baka OS, which the Quran claims to represent, keeps God absolute and distinct from creation.
Exactly. The Quranic Baka perspective insists that the Creator does not enter the material ledger, which leads us directly into the next massive theological divergence, the event of the crucifixion.
This is arguably the bedrock of Western Christianity. In the biblical narrative, the crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Jesus are the absolute center of the theology of salvation. The entire religion pivots on this moment. But in the Quranic text, the event is denied entirely. It is described as an illusion or a case of mistaken identity, stating they did not kill him nor crucify him. How does Dr. Waleed approach this?
Again, look at it through the lens of accounting versus grace. The Makkah operating system is based on debt and transaction. In this mindset, human sin creates a massive cosmic debt on the ledger.
And that debt must be paid.
A transaction must occur to balance the scales, and in this theological framework, it requires a blood sacrifice. The crucifixion is the ultimate Makkah transaction, the ultimate payment of debt.
That makes profound sense within his framework. The Makkah OS demands an accounting mechanism. Someone has to pay the bill. But the Baka OS transcends the transaction entirely.
Dr. Waleed argues that the Baka operating system, representing pure divine grace, bypasses the need for a physical bloody transaction. God simply forgives out of infinite mercy without requiring a material payment on a ledger.
So no debt is owed.
Therefore, from the Quranic perspective, the physical crucifixion of the prophet was unnecessary and historically did not happen to him because the divine economy doesn't run on blood debt.
Which bleeds perfectly, no pun intended, into the next major divergence, the concept of original sin.
Right.
For the listener who might not be deep into theology, Pauline theology in the Bible introduces the idea of a fallen state. Basically, because Adam sinned in the garden, a stain of guilt is inherited by all humanity. We are born with a negative balance on our spiritual ledger.
And the Quran counters this by stating that Adam and Eve sinned, repented, and were entirely forgiven on the spot, completely rejecting the idea of inherited guilt.
And you can already see how Dr. Waleed maps this. Inheriting guilt is the ultimate Makkah concept. It is a debt passed down through generations.
Exactly. It is a literal accounting error applied to your ledger before you were even born.
Yeah.
The Quranic Baka perspective views a mistake as an individual event. You err, you ask for grace, you receive grace, and the event is over. The ledger is clean. There is no generational debt.
It really is two entirely different ways of viewing the universe. A universe of debt versus a universe of grace. Are there other narrative examples where this plays out in his research?
Yes, look at the narrative of the sacrificial son. The Bible explicitly names Isaac as the son Abraham was commanded to sacrifice.
And the Quran.
The Quran does not explicitly name the son in the text, but the contextual narrative and the overwhelming Islamic tradition identify him as Ishmael. Dr. Waleed connects this to the Makkah desire for exclusivity and earthly inheritance.
So, securing the covenant through a specific preferred bloodline.
Versus the Baka submission to the divine will regardless of earthly lineage.
The final area Dr. Waleed focuses on, which I found incredibly compelling, is how the two texts handle the character and behavior of the prophets themselves. Why is the biblical narrative so often R-rated, while the Quran seems to actively protect prophetic honor?
This is a crucial point for Dr. Waleed. Let's look at three specific examples: David, Solomon, and Joseph.
Starting with David. The biblical narrative of David is famously raw. It details his adultery with Bathsheba, his abuse of power, and his arrangement of the murder of her husband Uriah on the front lines of battle. It is a story of profound moral failure, deceit, and subsequent repentance.
But the Quran entirely omits this sordid narrative. It portrays David as a noble, wise prophet who makes a minor error in judgment regarding a dispute between two brothers, but there is absolutely no mention of adultery, conspiracy, or murder. The Quran actively defends his prophetic honor.
Then there is Solomon. The Bible describes Solomon in his old age being led completely astray by his many foreign wives. It says he fell into gross idolatry, building high places and altars to other gods.
And again, the Quran acts as a corrective filter. It portrays Solomon as a perfect, immensely grateful servant endowed with miraculous powers, completely and explicitly rejecting the idea that he ever fell into idolatry or disbelief. It clears his name.
And finally, Joseph. The Bible has the story of Potiphar's wife attempting to seduce him. The biblical narrative is somewhat dramatic and focuses heavily on the external events and the physical escape.
The Quran dedicates an entire, highly streamlined, beautifully constructed chapter to Joseph. Dr. Waleed points out that the Quranic version heavily emphasizes Joseph's internal purity, his immense wisdom, and his absolute unwavering chastity. It refines the story to highlight his flawless character rather than wallowing in the sordid details of the temptation.
So, synthesizing all of this, why does the Makkah OS want flawed prophets? Dr. Waleed's overarching point seems to be that the Bible shows the prophets as incredibly flawed humans, sometimes committing horrific crimes because it fits with an earth-tethered, human-edited narrative.
Right, it records human drama, political justifications, and moral failures, because that is what humans do.
Exactly.
Dr. Waleed posits that a crashed operating system produces corrupted files. The human compilers of the biblical texts, operating under the Makkah mindset, recorded history through an earthly lens.
But the
Quran, representing the Makkah operating system, steps in to say, the audio crime scene in the past corrupted the files. Here's the original pristine data. The Quran presents the prophets as protected and elevated because, in the Makkah framework, if the channel of the divine message is corrupt, the message itself cannot be trusted.
It is a staggering, cohesive theory of everything. He traces a straight, logical line from a single phonetic syllable spoken at the foot of a mountain all the way to the macroscopic theological divides that define major world religions today.
Dr. Khaled Waleed's massive comparative analysis forces us to look at ancient texts not just as stories or myths, but as living, breathing ecosystems of language, psychology, biology, and divine intervention.
Let's take a breath and just recap the incredible journey we've been on today. We started with a simple social media meme highlighting a glaring contradiction in a single verse: we will listen and obey versus we hear and disobey.
From there, we dove into the microscopic phonetic world, discovering the audio illusion, the phonetic mask, where the outward Hebrew promise perfectly mimicked the Arabic sound of rebellion.
We explored the temporal trap, looking at how the constant use of the future tense and the statistical erasure of the past tense created a linguistic hiding place from guilt.
We then followed that linguistic evasion into the physical world, analyzing how the rejection of divine manna for earthly starches caused a biological downgrade, physically trapping them in the 40-year wandering.
And finally, we zoomed out to see how the choice of the transactional Makkah over the grace of Baka caused a cognitive crash that, according to Dr. Waleed, explains the massive theological differences from the Trinity to the crucifixion between the Bible and the Quran.
It is an absolute masterclass in connecting disparate data points into a unified theory.
And that leaves us with a final provocative thought to chew on as we wrap up. We usually think of language just as a tool, right? It's a neutral instrument we use to describe our lives, to order coffee, to make promises to our bosses or our spouses. But what if, as Dr. Waleed's linguistic deep dive suggests, language is actually a biological and spiritual trap? What if the words you use to avoid the hard truths in your present moment, the little lies, the phonetic masks, the constant deferral to "I'll do it tomorrow," eventually become the very wilderness you are forced to wander in? What if your daily vocabulary is actively building the cage you are trapped inside?
It is a terrifying and honestly liberating thought. The words we speak are not just empty air, they are the architecture of our reality.
So the next time you find yourself standing at the foot of your own metaphorical mountain, ready to make a big promise, pay very close attention to the exact words coming out of your mouth. Are you speaking the raw truth of your heart, or are you just panting like a dog in the desert, hoping the sound of your voice will hide the reality of your intentions? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Dr. Khaled Waleed's sources. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we will see you next time.